Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Arkham Sessions. My name is Brian Ward. With me, as always, the psychologist to the superheroes, superheroines, and supervillains of Gotham City, Dr. Andrea Letamendi. Hello, Andrea.
Hi, Brian.
First of all, I want to congratulate you. Yesterday, you had a very successful TED Talk at UCLA for TEDx UCLA. Talk a little bit about that.
Thanks, Brian. So, of course, people know that TED Talks are hopefully innovative, interesting, inspiring, but short speeches. And I was honored to be invited to speak at the annual TEDx UCLA conference taking place at the UCLA campus. And I did a TED Talk about capes, cowls, and courage. And
yeah, so basically it was like your life story.
Right. So I talked about, of course, Batman, the animated series, and how it fascinated me and propelled me into my field, which is, of course, psychology, as well as some more personal notes on my identity and being bullied, being somewhat conflicted internally, dealing with something called imposter syndrome, which is feeling like you're not quite enough no matter what you do or how hard you work, and coming full circle to embracing my nerdy self and finding a lot of value and confidence in being into comics and superhero characters.
Yeah, it was really cool. I enjoyed seeing it and hearing you talk about it. I know the audience did because there was a really big reaction, a lot of laughs right in the places where you wanted laughs. And there were even some oohs and ahs when you would address certain topics that were really cool. And I think the reception was very, very good for a group of people who had to, I'm not going to say had to sit through like 16 talks, but it was like a 7-hour day.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
For people.
It's a full day conference that they do. And of course, all of the speakers that are featured have very unique backgrounds, very different stories and different disciplines. So there were a variety of different types of speakers.
Yeah. And you were third to last. So that may be, one of those positions where, by that point, people in the room are like, oh, another talk. But they were really, really into it. And you really livened that crowd up. I was very impressed.
Thank you.
I want to thank a couple of people for providing a couple of things for that talk. We reached out to our friend Dan Milano, the creator of Greg the Bunny, who was happy to put us in touch with his friend, AJ Locascio, who is another actor and voice actor who has worked with Dan. And then he put us in touch with his friend, Dorian Black, I believe, who loaned us an amazing Batman costume. And then we got to put that on stage with you during your talk. And it was so popular that the people putting on the talk actually asked us to keep it on there for the last 2 talks of the day so that people could take pictures.
I didn't even notice that.
And do that. We put him up there right before your talk. And then after the talk, I was like, you want me to take him down? They were like, no, keep him up there. Because at the end of this thing, people are going to want to take pictures. So, that was awesome. The costume was awesome. We ended up getting a mannequin from a local place here in LA that both sells and rents mannequins for TV and film. And, if you've seen any costume displays at museums or movie theaters, whatever, this company is the one who does it. And they were all too happy to give us a mannequin to use for that. So the entire thing just looked awesome. And I just want to thank everybody for helping us out with that.
It really took a community of people. Even though I was up there on stage, I appreciate all the support. I appreciate your support, Brian. You've been a huge help in hearing me rehearse and pretty much knowing everything line by line. And also, of course, the folks that have contributed to giving me the opportunity to basically have Batman with me on stage. And I hope, I don't know if this is true, but I hope that my TED Talk is so far the only TED Talk that is done with Batman.
Maybe, yeah. Hopefully, I don't know. I haven't. I've seen a lot of TED Talks. I don't think I've seen any TED Talks that were specifically focused on superheroes or the psychology behind superheroes or what it means to use superheroes to push yourself a little further in life. And so it was a very inspiring talk. And I know you had a lot of people come up to you afterward and congratulate you and tell you how much they enjoyed it. If you're following along on DVD or on Amazon or YouTube, this is actually the first episode of Volume 3 of Batman the Animated Series. This is Shadow of the Bat, and it's a 2-part episode. And for good reason. There's a lot going on here. It's our first appearance of Barbara Gordon as Batgirl.
Right. We have seen her before. We've seen her interact with Batman. We've seen her kind of show off some of her tech skills and her acrobatic gymnastic skills, but this is the first time that she becomes Batgirl.
Yeah, the first time we saw her was in Heart of Steel, and that was the one with Hardak, the HAL 9000 like artificial intelligence that ended up taking her father and turning him into a robot, and taking Batman and turning him into a robot. And you're right. We got an opportunity to really see her sort of use some of those detective skills and some of that, some of those wits about her, sort of alluding to the fact that one day we would see her as Batgirl, and now is that chance. So once again, it revolves around her father, who has gone missing, sort of. He's not really missing. He's just out of the picture. So we open this episode up with a takedown of Rupert Thorne and his thugs. Rupert is bringing in contraband through Gotham exports. It's a very popular way for the Italian mob, especially back in the day, was import-export business. So they're sort of alluding to that. And the thugs are arrested by Gordon and an assistant commissioner, deputy commissioner by the name of Gil Mason. And Gil sort of seems to be taking on this lead role of, almost an Elliot Ness. We're going to go in, we're going to take down the crime lords. And the entire thing has been driven by these anonymous tips by some mystery informant.
I'd love to know who this mysterious informant is. This is the third gang lord Mason's brought down in as many months.
Well, and once Batman / Bruce Wayne discovers that there is another kind of mysterious crime-fighting vigilante in Gotham City, he's a little bit annoyed by this.
Yeah, he's kind of uncomfortable by this idea. Or he's just sort of like, who could this guy be? I'm very unhappy with this.
Right.
Because Gil and Gordon have taken down 3 mob bosses in very recent weeks and months.
Right.
I mean, they're like on a roll.
Do you think that Batman is sort of feeling like he's been pushed out? Because he and Commissioner Gordon have a very close relationship. And now this guy comes in, Gil, and he and Commissioner Gordon are pretty successful. Could it be that there's no need for Batman? And so he's not just feeling this sense of, well, my job is sort of being threatened here, but my relationship with this man, slightly older man, potential father figure, potential mentor, potential companion, the fact that their relationship is a little bit, I don't know, distanced now because of it. Do you think that that's one of the reasons he's a little bit annoyed?
Maybe. I think one of the reasons that he could be annoyed is exactly what Alfred says.
If this continues, you might even be forced into taking a vacation.
Gotham City might be cleaned up before Bruce / Batman ever, I don't want to say intended for it to be cleaned up, but certainly faster than he anticipated it being cleaned up, which brings up the question that you and I have brought up several times in the past. What happens if Batman no longer has a city to clean up? He seems annoyed by the idea that they're cleaning up Gotham faster than maybe he would like.
Right.
And it begs the question, well, is what he's really unhappy about the fact that he's not the one doing it, or that it's maybe happening a little too fast?
Right.
I don't know. That brings me to something I was actually wondering about actually last week as we were watching Batman going down the road chasing Harley and the Joker in the car, and we see, as we've mentioned in the last couple of episodes, Batman has a tendency to sort of put other people in danger when he's madly chasing whatever villain is barreling down the streets of Gotham. Doesn't Batman have a radio in that car? Couldn't he be informing police officers, hey, they're headed down Main Street, cut them off down at the pass, I'm chasing you, whatever. Batman seems to be doing it entirely independently of the police. Meanwhile, we're looking at the way Gil and Gordon are taking him down, and like you said, Gil is sort of taking that place of Batman, where Gordon and Gil are doing it within the police and within the realm of the law.
Well,
they are clearly communicating with one another, and Batman wouldn't.
And they're doing it in a way that's within the system.
Yeah.
And for Batman being more anti-system, I think that that's a big slap in the face.
Mm-hmm.
But as we're learning about later in the episode, is it really as ethical as it seems?
Let's talk about that, because we find out that the system is changing quite dramatically, and that maybe this tipster is giving out information that could be true, could be untrue. Either way, it's very unsettling. When we go to the home of Commissioner Gordon, we see Barbara. She's working out her gymnastics routine, and unfortunately, Gordon is arrested by his protege.
This is a joke, right?
On what charges?
Accepting bribes.
You can't be serious.
The department has reason to believe that you've been taking money from Rupert Thorne for years.
Now, you and I know this couldn't possibly be true, but who else maybe thinks that it's not true? We know Harvey Bullock doesn't believe it. Barbara Gordon doesn't believe it. Batman clearly doesn't believe it. And yet they've got all this physical evidence. Drea, whether Gordon did it or not, is there some form of denial around those people around Gordon? You know how they always say, like, I never would have guessed that our neighbor would have killed 20 people in their basement, or whatever. He was such a nice guy. He was such a, never in a million years would I have expected. What are those people around Gordon thinking right now?
Probably the same thing. He is an upstanding individual in Gotham City. He has always been ethical. He's always been, in fact, so rule-oriented to a fault. And I think there have been, when we've been deconstructing the trio of Batman, Bullock, and Commissioner Gordon, we can sort of see that spectrum. I think that despite that persona, people could still believe that, okay, if there's evidence, it's very possible that he's done this. And hard evidence, they cited hard evidence that there was a trail to a bank account in South America. There are tickets, there are receipts. So there's evidence with his signatures, and with hard evidence like that, I think people are more likely to believe that it is possible. And frankly, it's Gotham City. So there's all sorts of corruption going on.
Well, one's got to wonder, why hasn't Rupert Thorne ever ended up behind bars in the past? And if this is true, then it could be because Gordon never got, quote unquote, enough evidence to get Rupert Thorne behind bars, or to put him behind bars. Now, there's going to be a rally in the honor of Gordon. All the cops and all the people of Gotham City who don't believe that it's true. Harvey Bullock's going to be there. Barbara is going to be there. Barbara asks Batman to make an appearance.
Sorry, but there's more to this than a simple frame-up, and I'm not going to find out by appearing at rallies.
Yeah, and by the way, he's very dismissive of Barbara in this scene,
Very
where
dismissive.
she's essentially asking him for help, and she knows that he is probably the single person who could turn this around. So for him to deny her and almost kind of push her out at the same time is hard to see, because he's telling her, you know, one, you don't know what you're talking about, your idea is terrible, and then two, you're on your own with this, because I need to do what's right in my mind to get things back on track and to save Commissioner Gordon. So I think it's really interesting that the dynamic there is set up for him to be pushing her away and kind of dismissive of her.
Well, and it brings us to the thing that you've always said about Batman. He believes he's the only one who can do this mission. And, you know, yeah, you kids go off over there, have your rally. I'm going to go do some important detective work over here.
Well, he's going to dress up as Matches Malone and take care of business
Which
that
is a
way.
brand new character for him. He's no longer in the white hair with the fake 5 o'clock shadow anymore. Now he's Matches Malone, who's got a weird sort of pencil thin mustache and black hair and
some makeups, like not just the 5 o'clock shadow, but he's got a prosthetic nose and
Does
shading.
he? I didn't even notice that. I didn't catch that. Good catch. Yeah, Matches Malone. He went and spent a little extra money to become a new person. So that's very cool.
You know, Bruce Wayne is all about alter egos and identities. So for him, this is fun.
Do you ever just imagine Bruce sitting in the Batcave going like, oh, the new nose came in. Oh my God. Alfred, come on, we're going to try this out. Like, oh my God, it really transforms me. Oh. You know, like you can't just do that without a little bit of practice. You know?
Totally.
So he's like, oh my God, it came in.
This explains
my
why
detective makeup kit
this
showed
explains why when Barbara approaches him and invites him to the rally, he's just like, no, I have to put on my disguise.
No, I've got more important things to do. Alfred, get out the disguise kit. We finally get to use Matches Malone. It's a character he's been workshopping for the past couple of months. He's like, yes. So we end up following Matches, and Robin goes to the rally. He wants to see what's going to happen. They end up having this big thing outside, and Batman shockingly makes an appearance, which is kind of weird because we just saw him become Matches Malone. He's no longer, he's not in the Batman costume, but Batman makes an appearance. He swings through and, you know, dramatically raises his cape and then sort of takes off as if that's all the appearance he needs to make. He doesn't actually say anything in honor of Jim Gordon or anything like that. Just sort of shows up, lets everyone knows he's on the case, and then takes off. Turns out, not so much Batman. It is Barbara dressed as Batman. Now, this is where it becomes problematic for Batman to be such a beloved character in Gotham City. As we saw, there's an entire store dedicated to him with all the merch. Maybe this is where she got the cape and cowl and the costume.
Right. It was something she had to do quickly, right?
Yeah.
So she probably purchased that outfit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she probably got it straight from that store, and you know, it makes you wonder why you don't see more people just purchasing those outfits and going around town as Batman. But she's swinging around and doing things. She looks good as a gymnast, and she's, you know, she's believable as Batman from a distance.
Yeah.
Then she is reveling in her success, trying to pull off a Batman appearance, and a car is driving swiftly down the road toward the rally, and gunfire just launches into the podium, the lectern. Everyone is taking cover, and including Gil, and a lot of people could be hurt. Robin and Batgirl end up getting into the fray. Like she goes right to it. Unlike people who would run away from this sort of thing, she takes that heroic first step and starts going after them, and does a nice job. They end up taking the thugs out. But what's interesting to me during this is that Robin doesn't take down the crooks right away after, stopping them. Instead, he goes after Batgirl. He would rather chase her down to figure out what's up with this. He ends up tearing her cowl. Her red hair comes out through the back.
A girl?
And then the crooks are able to just pick up their machine guns and start shooting at them again. Why is Robin more interested in taking down the Batman wannabe than the people who have machine guns shooting at police officers on the podium?
I think he's unsure if she's a threat as well, right? He doesn't know what her agenda is. So he really needs to find out who this person is and what they're doing. And the best way to do that is to catch them. And he pretty much succeeds in the sense that he discovers, okay, she's a girl, sure, but she seems to be on our side.
Right. And then they end up chasing the criminals down the back alleys of Gotham City. They get separated. Batgirl chases one. Robin chases another. Batgirl actually has an upper hand on her guy, but he kicks her off and then escapes. The same thing sort of seems to happen to Robin. When we see Robin come back, he doesn't have his guy either. And not only that, Batgirl has disappeared. So, he's upset that, even she's gone. And Barbara goes and finds the guy that she had. She goes to the police station. She's looking through all the crime books, and she finds the culprit that she had in her grasp before he got away. And
there's a book at the police station that profiles all of the potential mobsters and henchmen.
Yeah, it's like the police books, all the mugshots of former convicts and people who've been arrested for this or that. And she's going through those books. She finds the guy, and she goes over to the one man that she thinks might be able to help her. That's Gil Mason. She goes to his house to say, "Look, I think I know who one of the shooters is." Except when she looks past Gil into his house, that man is standing there in Gil's house.
That's kind of terrifying, that scene.
It is very terrifying.
You know why? And I think, I know you didn't ask, but why is it terrifying? It's not just that she sees that the man that she has just ID'd is in Gil's house and faces her. And they faced each other in the alley when her life was in peril.
Yeah.
But also this means she immediately knows this means that a person that she trusted, who was close with her father, who could potentially help get her father out of jail, is in cahoots with this dude. So that realization hits her, and it's just like you see that expression in her face, and it's just an immediate feeling of danger.
Yeah. And she finds a way to remove herself from the situation. It's a good thing she was wearing a cape and cowl, because if she had been identified as a person, she would also be in danger. But she now knows what she's dealing with, and she takes off. Meanwhile, Robin is going back looking at the tape of the drive-by and notices
Mr. Mason ducked before he saw the guns.
Almost as though he expected it.
So even Robin is onto it. He thinks he knows. And he goes to check out Gil as well, and Batgirl shows up. Let's talk about the fact that Barbara has taken it upon herself to become Batgirl permanently.
So Batman can't help me? Fine. In that case, let's see what Batgirl can do.
Talk a little bit about the fact that her motivation for becoming Batgirl in this case is not the same as, say, Batman, who lost his parents to a killer, and Robin, who lost his parents to a killer. Now, she's lost her parent to, crime in Gotham City, so she's got that going for her, but it's not violent crime, and it's not... she's not necessarily motivated by vengeance like Batman and Robin were when they started out.
Right. She clearly has a different motivation psychologically, that her origin story, if you will, is different than theirs. But I think what's great about the two episodes we're talking about is that we can kind of see her evolve from this single incident, which is somewhat traumatic for her, like going back to her father being removed from the home, arrested, put into a police car. That if that has ever happened to you, in that you've seen a parent arrested. Now she's an adult herself, but to have that experience is very traumatic, and then to come to the realization, which happens in the end of the first episode, I can't trust anyone. The only person who I trust in is my father, and he's incarcerated. He's unavailable. I have to take things into my own hands, essentially. And we see how she reaches out to Batman, and he denies her. She reaches out to Gil, and she finds out he's a potential threat. He could be the most dangerous person. And so that moment where she's lying in bed, holding onto her teddy bear, kind of looking at the tattered Batman suit from the first time she wore that, it's this moment of transformation. Yeah, I'm ready to take things into my own hands, and in order to do that, it can't be this Batman costume. I have to be my own. I have to create my own alter ego, essentially. Yeah.
Well, the interesting thing about this is that she actually says that with Batman out of the picture, I've got to take this on and become Batgirl. And I find that to be a nice little take, because it's almost like, you're right, she can only trust her father. She can't even trust Batman because he's already turned her down at this point. So she's going to become Batman in a way. Like, she's going to take this suit. She already appeared as him at the rally, and now she's going to go become a crime fighter of her own as Batgirl.
Well, and there's a deeper level of symbolism here in terms of what happens to people, groups of people who have that sense of lack of control or lack of agency, or they have a need, they have a social need, they have a personal need, and they can't depend on other people to do it for them. So they have to step in and do it for themselves. Right. That sense of independence, but also that sense socially of nobody else is going to speak for me, work for me, represent me. I have to do it on my own. So I think for women especially, for groups who are underrepresented, that sentiment of I have my own back. I have to do this in order to get what I need out of this, in order to get myself, my family out of trouble. I think that movement is incredibly important.
But how is this any different than the mentality that Batman has, that he's the only person who can do this? Like, she's sort of taking on his actual mentality as she goes out into Gotham City to help her father when no one else seems to be able or willing to help.
Well, I think it's very similar. But the difference here is that she's asked for help. She's asked for resources. She's reached out, and she's been denied. She's been marginalized. She's been pushed away. And I think that story is unique. Batman and Robin, of course, have a very personal story related to how they ended up in the Cape and Cowl. But we didn't necessarily see Bruce Wayne reach out and ask for help. We saw him immediately reach out and resourcefully find training and mentors and ways in which he could be stronger. Right. But he immediately knew he was not going to rely on other people. And I think that's the difference here.
Right. Gil, while Robin and Batgirl are spying on him, receives a phone call, and it's a request to meet at an abandoned subway stop or tunnel, in an hour. And Robin basically also dismisses Batgirl in this moment. She's clearly wanting to be involved. She's clearly wanting to help. She wants the information that Robin is getting from this remote receiver where he's listening to the conversation. And he's very dismissive of her.
Well, show's over. You can run along home now.
Does he not like her because she's a girl? Or does he not like her because she is an amateur? She's new to the scene, and she's clearly not gone through the level of training and maybe even torture that Dick Grayson has had to go through in becoming Robin.
I don't know. He's a little hard to crack because he actually says that in different circumstances, he would be way into this. And so it sort of implies that, you know, I like you. I want to hang out with you. You're really intriguing. But right now, you're kind of, you're on my turf and I need to push you away. So his immediate response is, no, we can't work together.
Yeah.
But I would say I don't really blame him for having that mentality because Batman has the same mentality and Batman's his adult mentor, if you will. So he learned that sort of, you know, that sort of interaction from Batman.
Yeah. Where's Matches Malone during all of this? Well, Matches is following the henchman, and he's really sort of tracking down who this mystery informant is. He wants to know who this person is behind Gil Mason and his success. And oddly, you pointed this out as we watched this episode. It's kind of weird to see Matches Malone with the
line launcher.
The line launcher. You know, Batman doesn't tend to take out these gadgets where they might be identified by someone.
Right.
But you know, suddenly Matches Malone is walking up the side of the building, you know, toward a window, tries to open it, and is electrocuted, falls unconscious, and he is awoken by the thugs of what we find out is the informant. And of course, we know this voice as he steps out into the shadows. It's his old friend Harvey Dent, Two-Face. Two-Face.
Don't call me Harvey.
Don't call me Harvey.
Don't call me that. It's Two-Face to you, pretty boy.
Two-Face wants to know who this guy is. You know, why are you hanging out here? And Matches, very quick on his feet, says that he wants in and he wants to become a criminal. As we know Two-Face to do, he relies on the coin.
Good heads you live, bad heads you don't. Simple, huh?
Unfortunately for Matches, he gets bad heads. And they take Matches along to have him killed. But first, they want him identified. They want to know who this guy is. So he brings in Gil from the police department to identify him. Have you ever seen this guy in the police station before? Is this a cop? Is this somebody who's trying to get in? And Gil's like, no, I've never seen this guy before in my life. I have no idea who this is. Really? This is why you brought me here? And the entire plan is sort of revealed.
Well, and it almost makes me wonder, like, maybe Bruce should have gone with his traditional disguise, because we've seen that guy around. Someone could say, oh yeah, I've seen that dude. He's kind of a vagrant. I guess he wants to be, you know, in the mob now.
Right. Yeah. That guy was once in a prison.
Right.
Way back in the day, he was in a box, where the sweat box for a while.
Memory's not so good, but other than that.
Yeah. So, you know, we find out that really the plan is Gil is going to be set up as the new commissioner, could happen as soon as tomorrow. And then maybe within a year, he is going to end up being, who knows, mayor of Gotham City, which would be a really bad thing for Gotham, I think. Or would it just be like regular Gotham City? I mean, if you've got a mob guy as the mayor, is it really even any worse than it already is? Dre, let's talk about Gil here, because Gil is certainly sort of the puppet of Two-Face, but you've got a guy who is a cop. He's corrupt. He is clearly ambitious. He wants to raise to power very quickly, and he's willing to do anything, including get rid of who is presumably his mentor in the police department. What do you see as being Gil's case?
Right. So you mean psychologically what's going on with him?
Yeah.
Well, we know that there are a number of instances where we have evidence that he's prone to violence and he's okay with collateral damage, if you will. So earlier when the henchmen shoot up the podium during the rally. Gil's there and knows that this is going to happen, and
knows that they could be hurt or killed.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And he's totally okay with it.
These are machine guns blasting, and so he bends down knowing that there could be fatalities. Later, he's IDing Matches Malone and seems to have no problem with the idea that this guy gets offed in the subway. And of course, later when he's confronting Gordon, he has no problem with the idea that Gordon will be killed, and he could very well be the person to do it. And he pulls out a gun. So there's a lot of speculation, of course, because we haven't seen a lot of his history. We're not really sure what he's done before.
But something you just mentioned, we do see him later. Anybody could have killed Gordon, and Gil may be okay with it. But Gil is going to take it upon himself. He actually takes out a gun and aims it right at Gordon's head. Like, Gil is going to be the one to pull the trigger. We don't know much about Gil's history. You're absolutely right. But that's a moment that I think is kind of telling. What do you think?
So what do you mean? Are you saying that he's a murderer?
He's not just a guy who is willing to let other people die around him for the sake of gaining power. He's a guy who's willing to actually do it himself in order to gain power.
So I would ask you, in Gotham City, why is this unique? Like, what about this is troublesome for you?
I don't know. I don't know that it's unique in Gotham City, and I don't know that it's troublesome, but he has no consideration for other people's feelings or emotions. He's willing to hurt them if necessary in order to get what he wants. Seems to be okay with it. He's not really wrestling with that problem. Are we placing him in a borderline or antisocial personality? Does he have a mental disorder of some kind?
That's a good question, and I see that you're starting to kind of get into a diagnostic mindset, which is good, which is what we do. But I think we're getting too caught up in the diagnosis, in a potential diagnosis, simply because we know this guy is dangerous and violent. And I think that this is a common pitfall for our society, actually. Once we see someone who's murderous, homicidal, and potentially violent, that is a clear indication of a mental illness. And this is like one of the most difficult, this is one of the most challenging myths in regards to the association between mental health or mental illness and homicidal behavior. So I just want to kind of tease that apart, that no, there's no, the simple behavior of murdering somebody or potentially or threatening to murder someone, that alone, while very alarming, that alone does not make a diagnosis.
So you don't have to have a mental illness in order to be willing to kill someone, is what you're saying.
That is what I'm saying. It's really hard for people to grasp that because obviously homicide has to be explained by something. It's such an egregious taboo that it has to be explained by something. Unfortunately, that is a particular behavior alone that is not explained by a number of mental illnesses or any single mental illness. However, have there been some associations between violent behavior and certain mental illnesses? Of course there have. So there are some studies that show, for instance, that that particular diagnoses such as schizophrenia, drug and alcohol abuse, and, as you said, antisocial personality disorder are more associated with violent behavior.
Okay.
We have to be really careful when we say that because an association doesn't mean a cause. Right. So we have to kind of tease out what came first.
Gotcha.
We also have to kind of look at the actual numbers. What I mean by
there are numbers involved?
Yes. So what I mean by that is when we actually look at studies done by the justice system or by the psychiatry field, it's interesting that only about 15% of persons that have committed homicide would meet for a diagnostic, would meet for a mental health disorder.
So you're saying that only 15% of people who have been arrested or proven to have killed someone, only 15% of those people could be diagnosed with a mental disorder.
There's a range there, so that is the lower end of it. That would pertain to the most serious types, like serious mental illness.
Okay.
If you kind of widen that range and talk about any kind of mental disorder, studies differ, but we're looking at anywhere between 15 to 30% of persons who have committed murder, which is, let's think about that number. Now, you and I have talked about the prevalence of mental illness in the general population. That's about a quarter of people. A quarter of people anywhere in the U.S. would meet for some diagnostic mental health disorder. So when you look at the fraction of people who have committed a violent act such as murder and compare that to the prevalence of mental health in the general population, you're not seeing much difference.
So I'm not trying to play devil's advocate here, but are those numbers at all hindered by the fact that not every single person that kills another person may go through a psychological treatment or analysis? I mean,
yeah.
If someone stabs another person on the street, or someone, I don't know, in gang violent situations shoots another person, that person isn't necessarily taken to a psychologist and given any kind of workup,
yeah.
are they? So are those numbers at all cuffed by...
Right. You're making a really good point. And a study of just a little over 30 mass murderers. Mass murderers are not common, right? So a study of over 30 mass murderers found that a quarter of them had some kind of psychiatric history.
Interesting.
Meaning, now again, a quarter of them. So most of them, 3/4 of them, did not have the psychiatric history. But let's tease that out a little bit. That means that you're right, that they would have had to been through the system before their mass murder event, right? And not everyone goes through the system. So either before or after the incident. So yes, we have to kind of take these numbers into account and analyze them in a way that's complicated, but in a way that really gives justice to the groups that we're talking about.
Gotcha.
And to really understand that we have to move away, especially with something like this kind of behavior. We have to move away from trying to have a one-to-one, one behavior means one mental illness, and look at other behavioral indicators. So in the justice system, especially when it comes to psychological and psychiatric fields related to crimes, related to violent crimes, we have to think about behavioral indicators, not so much mental disorders. So for instance, did they have violent acts in their history? Was there, were there signs of violent acts that led to this particular homicide? And that actually is a much bigger indicator. It's a much bigger predictor than any single mental health diagnosis. In fact, any single mental health diagnosis is not an indicator at all of violence.
Right.
When you look at folks, when you look at the population of folks who could be diagnosed with a mental health disorder, that really doesn't raise the level of serious violence. So that's the piece that I think is really challenging to or challenging for people to really tease apart and understand.
Yeah, it is. It isn't something that you normally think about. You think someone walks into a place with a gun and starts shooting people, that person must have a mental illness, and they might, but they also might not, and that's something that's kind of powerful to hear from you.
Right, and so there's so many more important things like these previous indicators of violence, environment, dangerous environments, culture, mob mentality, not mob mentality, but like
sure
mob mentality,
yeah.
Growing up or your career being a part of the mob. That is a particular culture that kind of embraces violent acts. And so gang activity, I mean, all these things are taken into account when understanding why somebody would take out a gun and threaten someone's life. So
what you're saying is there's a nature versus nurture argument to be had here as well.
There's always a nature-nurture argument, but
if you're raised by violent people and violence is what you know, then you don't have a mental disorder. You're just trained to do these things. That makes sense. So I want to talk about someone else who might be slipping up a little bit, and that is Batman, Drea. Over the past few episodes, we've established that Batman is letting his identity slip to a number of folks. Whether he wants to or not. He seems to be okay with it, though, in some cases. We've seen him with Talia. Of course, he didn't voluntarily give up his identity to Talia, but he did very willingly give up his identity to Zatanna just a couple of weeks ago. And now you've got a situation where he is disguised as Matches Malone, and when Robin and Batgirl get the opportunity to save him from near death, he yells out,
"Robin, look out!"
I instantly went like, wait, what are you doing? You're potentially outing yourself. Now think about it this way. He's got a fake nose, perhaps, yes. He's got a pencil-thin mustache. But you're essentially looking at the face of Batman. And Two-Face actually puts it together.
If he's Robin, that makes you.
But I don't even know what to...
Well, he's disguised as Matches Malone, so what is the big deal?
But the disguise isn't really so great a disguise that you're
pretty good.
That you're not looking at a human face.
No, it's good because he's getting punched as Matches Malone, and that prosthetic nose stays on. I think this is a good costume. I think this is a good disguise for him.
Yeah, and maybe the swelling from the punches is helping out. It's expanding his face a little bit, disguising him a little bit more. I don't know. It seems weird to me because he just gave himself up as Batman.
Well, I think I'm a little bit more disturbed later when, Robin presents him with this nicely wrapped
his clothes?
suit. Yeah, his bat suit.
Robin's carrying the bat suit around like, oh, you're going to need this.
It's like it's just been dry cleaned, though. It's like nicely packaged. He opens it up.
Well,
and it's folded.
Alfred, we've seen Alfred folding the bat suit before. True. So he was like, Master Dick, you need to take this to Master Bruce when you get an opportunity.
So Robin, Batman, and Batgirl are alone in one of the caverns of the subway, and Robin presents him with the suit so that he can transform from Matches Malone to Batman. And Batman takes off his shirt. You see full on Batman chest, and Batgirl is standing there.
But you know what, Drea? Sometimes you got to have opportunities where you get full on Batman chest. He's that comfortable.
It's a no-shirt zone.
It's a no-shirt. Actually, he's not that comfortable because
he's not
she's
comfortable.
watching him and he's like, do you mind?
Do you mind?
He is really uncomfortable with her being there, and she blushes and turns around.
Maybe he's got identifying marks. Maybe he has something like on his arm, like a scar or something, from all this like maybe he's afraid that if she sees him.
No, I think clearly what's going to happen is that his Matches Malone prosthetic, makeups and stuff are going to come off too, and he clearly doesn't want her to know that he's Bruce Wayne.
Right.
But what you were saying earlier is that there were instances where he was okay with some women knowing who he is, and
I'm not going to make it a gender thing. I'm some people.
Okay,
but
some people.
But if Two-Face had actually caught him and took off the Matches Malone, like Two-Face would now know. I'm just saying it's kind of reckless to yell to Robin and to allow Two-Face to put together, like, if that's Robin, then you're clearly Batman and you're not in costume. And if I could just figure out what is prosthetic about your face, I'm going to find out who you are.
I'm almost wondering now why this isn't the story that Harvey Dent, that Two-Face tells and almost got him. Because here he really almost got him.
He really almost got him. And there's a little bit of a connection to almost got him in this episode. We'll talk about that in a second. But you're right. He changes into his bat outfit. Now, Batman is the world's greatest detective, is he not? That's what we've established over the course of these episodes. Does he know who Batgirl is? Do you think, when he's looking at her, like, do you think he's pieced together, just even in this moment, the only person who it would make sense? Batgirl has never been seen before.
Right.
In Gotham City. But Commissioner Gordon just got arrested for doing this thing.
Right.
You've
so
got
you have
a girl,
this red-headed girl who's determined to get
him off. And, do you think...
yes, I think that he should know that all of the data is there. But for the purposes of, I guess, this particular story, he doesn't indicate at all that he knows.
Or does he? Because Batman is also dismissive of Batgirl. He's basically saying, at one point he says,
"It takes more than a costume and an attitude to do this work."
And then says,
"You've already fouled up once. Stay out of our way so it doesn't happen again."
Could that also be Bruce telling Barbara, I'm not going to put you in any sort of danger because I know you're the daughter of Commissioner Gordon, one of my closest allies and friends, father figure to me?
That's an excellent point. Yeah, that's really possible that he's actually trying to protect her and he doesn't want her involved in something that could end her life. On the other hand, I think equally possible that he is simply trying to kind of maintain the work that he's doing. Again, it's this sense of independence. It's this sense of only I can do this, and I don't know who you are. You may not have the training. You are, and he did tell her, you already fouled once.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that I can trust you to get involved.
I want to talk about this a little bit more in a couple of minutes as we wrap it up, but I want you to keep that in mind for sure. So Batman and Robin are both pretty dismissive of Batgirl until there's a flooding of the subway canals, and suddenly Batgirl rescues Robin. She launches a line, she catches his hand, she brings him in. Batman helps her fish him back to safety. She ends up escaping the tunnel. The two of them are swept away, but clearly she has established herself as someone who maybe can take care of herself. And their opinion of her changes a little bit in that moment where she saves Robin. And while they are trying to get out of danger there with the water, she is left sort of finishing this episode off, where we see that Two-Face and his men frame Gordon even more by breaking him out of prison in front of Harvey Bullock and actually saying,
"Come on, Commissioner. Rupert Thorne doesn't desert his friends," in front of
one of the biggest advocates for Gordon. So they end up getting away, and Gil, as we said earlier, is about to kill Gordon down at the wharf, and Batgirl comes in and saves him. Now, instantly, Gordon is okay with this. He's never seen this girl before. There's never been a female vigilante like Batgirl, dressed as a bat, looking so similar to Batman. Clearly, this is a new member of the Bat family. And Gordon's just like, hey, Batgirl, I presume. He's totally okay with it. But they're kind of screwed until Batman and Robin show up and save them. Batman ends up fighting Two-Face. Batgirl ends up taking down Gil.
Which is a good matchup because, of course, Two-Face and Batman have history. So it's kind of interesting to see them get in a literal fist fight. But Batgirl specifically goes after Gil. And I think this is her personal vendetta, right? This is the man who was not just going to kill her father on the dock there, but also who was behind this entire mission to take down her father. So this scene in particular, they're in a boat and she's just punching and kicking him, and she's taking him down, and the boat explodes and she ends up pulling him out.
Well, Gil, before the boat explodes, Gil ends up learning Batgirl's identity. He pulls he pulls the cowl off of her. He says that now is the time to figure out who you are. Pulls the cowl off of her and seems surprised, and she kicks him off, and he ends up really getting in danger when this boat explodes, and she takes him. She's like, I should just leave you here. But she's got that hero mentality. She picks him up. She takes him. Turns out Gil is left in a coma. Presumably, he never wakes up from that coma because he would probably then out Barbara Gordon as Batgirl. But What's funny to me is Batman, when taking on Two-Face, ends up throwing a batarang and knocking off a giant silver dollar because they are standing, or he's running into the silver dollar there at the wharf, and in between the words silver and dollar is a giant silver dollar coin, and that coin falls and ends up falling on Two-Face. Very similar to the giant penny. I can only assume he didn't take it, but I want to know why Batman didn't take the giant silver dollar and put it with his giant penny and be like, oh,
my giant coins. Yeah. I think it's because the giant silver dollar didn't kill somebody.
Oh,
whereas
that's right.
The giant penny did.
Yeah, killed but 2 people or something like that.
That's what makes it special. That's when you take it home.
That's when you let Alfred polish it up, standing on the ladder and polish it up. That is true. So they end up having this press conference where Gordon, of course, is released, and everybody understands that he was framed and that Gil Mason is the guy who they were going after. And the reporters, Summer Gleason asks what he thinks of Batgirl. And Gordon's response is interesting.
As far as I'm concerned, she's as welcome in Gotham City as the Batman.
How do you think Batman will feel about that?
I suppose there's always room for one more.
This is very out of character for Bruce/Batman, is it not? Because haven't we established that Bruce thinks badly of you before he he's welcoming this girl in?
Well, I think that he has seen her potential, and he has definitely his perspective of her has changed. In the beginning of this adventure, he was pushing her away as Batgirl and telling her that she's not cut out for it and she's already messed up and she needs to stay out. Toward the end, she's saved Robin, she's saved herself, she saved her father. So I think that Bruce can see that potential in her, and maybe there's even this connection, knowing, okay, if there's an important mission. Now I'm going back to what you said, that he probably knows who she is, right? If there is a personal connection to why you're doing what you're doing, you're on board. I accept you.
Could it also be that he sees the obvious determination that if I don't accept her, she's still just going to go out and do it because she's done it already, so I might as well train her. Otherwise, we're going to have this girl running around Gotham City as a vigilante.
Could also be that he's getting tired and he's just like, yeah,
it's going to be time. It's going to be time to take on a Batman family. By the way, are you familiar, Drea? You've heard the term Bat Family.
Yeah,
Are you
of course.
familiar with the Batman family from the 60s?
No.
Well, it's funny because Batgirl has her origins in what's known as the Batman family. Back in the day, in the very early, it was in Batman 139. This was in 1961. This was a result of a lot of talk and speculation about the sexuality of Batman and Robin. Obviously, you've got a bachelor and his young ward, and a lot of people were speculating that they were gay. And DC's answer to that was to establish a female love interest for Batman. So they ended up creating a character named Kathy Kane. And Kathy Kane was Batwoman. And her niece was Betty Kane, who was her own Robin of sorts.
Yeah.
Batgirl.
And so this refers to the marriage of Batman and Batwoman.
Batwoman.
Because I have a shirt with
Batman
that shirt. Marrying Batwoman.
Yes.
And Robin being a little bit upset around that.
It's Batman, Batwoman are sort of seen as the parental figures, and then they also had Betty Kane as Batgirl, and then you had Robin as sort of their kids. And then throw on top of that the fact that they had the Bat-Hound Ace, Ace the Bat-Hound. They had Bat-Mite as well, who was the little chibi.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Bat-Mite.
Extraterrestrial Batman. And they were known as the Batman family. And they actually had comic books, you know, an entire line of the Batman family books. Unfortunately, this became a very silly series. There isn't a whole lot you can do with these characters and make it as serious as Batman had been up to that point. But that was the origin of Batgirl. That was the first Batgirl we ever saw. It wasn't until later, because they ended up retiring those characters and sort of retconning them out of existence at one point. And then around the time of the TV series, in the 3rd season, they needed something to sort of make the series more popular. So they ended up, DC created a female character that was going to be Commissioner Gordon's daughter. And the TV series folks saw this and incorporated her into the 3rd season of Batman. And she became so popular, she almost got her own show.
Right, and this is the version where we have the red-headed Batgirl with the purple and gold costume. I think that's sort of the one that's really recognized.
Yeah, the executive producer of the show, William Dozier, is actually the guy who suggested that she be Commissioner Gordon's daughter.
Yeah.
And it was Yvonne Craig ended up getting the role and became very popular. That costume became very popular. That purple, you were saying that the shiny, purple and gold outfit. And Batgirl from that point on became a very popular character. And I enjoy seeing her now being introduced in the animated series, very similar to the way that she was introduced in the comics, because in the comics, she was wearing a Batman costume to a costume party.
Yeah. I remember this.
And then ended up breaking up, some thugs who were going through, a crime, and then ended up becoming Batgirl.
Right, and you see her go through the process of making the costume and trying to fit it, not just physically, but fit it to this persona that she wanted to be. Yeah. And that's why I really like this this episode. I like origin stories, and I like that she had already been established before. Like, it's not like this is the first time we saw Barbara. We've seen her before. Yeah. And this is sort of the first real chapter of her as Batgirl, and the reason that propelled her into this identity. I think all of it was really well presented, and I think is, for me at least, is a personal, I guess, relatable story.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing more of her. I think we might see more of Batgirl down the line.
I wouldn't be at all surprised.
I love that this was really about Batgirl's origin and her becoming who she is as Batgirl, exploring that identity and sort of fighting through some initial doubts, fighting with other people, trying to get help, and finally deciding, I need to take this into my own hands. Yeah. And toward the end, that feeling of community and joining the Bat family.
Yeah. And I like the thing about a Batgirl that I've always appreciated is the fact that she is normal. She is someone who wasn't brought in as a character who lost both of her parents in a tragic, sort of battle of mob bosses or whatever. She's not like Bruce Wayne, who lost his parents in this tragedy and then went off and molded a character of Batman. She's not Dick Grayson, who very much the same sort of thing happened. She's sort of our every man, every woman connection to the Bat family. She is someone who is an amazing gymnast, and she's very smart. We've seen her use her wits. She deserves to be in that costume, but she's not them. You know, she hasn't gone through those extensive years of training.
Well, we shall see.
That's right. Well, we shall see, or we shall not see next week when we take on Blind as a Bat.
Nice.
Yeah. That'll be very cool. Drea, until then, where can folks find you?
I'm on Twitter at Arkham Asylum Doc, and my website is underthemaskonline.com.
And I am at bward028. You can also email us We are arkhamsessions@gmail.com, or you can come tweet us. We are both hanging out over at Arkham Sessions on Twitter. You should also check out our home network, Fanboy Comics, by going to fanboycomics.net, or you can follow them on Twitter. They are at Fanboy Comics with an X. So I am Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Andrea Letamendi.
And we are
the Arkham Sessions.